almost 3 months, the Battle of Stalingrad between Germany and the Soviet Union escalated to levels of violence not yet seen since the Second World War began. By mid-November of 1942, the Soviet army barely held on to what remained of the city in what seemed to be a doomed campaign. The Germans, despite heavy losses in the onset of winter, had conquered 90% of Stalingrad and were expecting to take what remained of the city by the new year. The taste of victory was extremely close for the German Sixth Army. But in what some would call one of the luckiest gambles in military history, Joseph Stalin had a backup plan. By 19 November 1942, the effort to seize the southern oil fields had been successful. German Army Group A was close to defeating Russian forces in the Caucasus region, while Army Group B was on the cusp of defeating Russian forces in Stalingrad and seizing the Don and Volga rivers. But, unbeknownst to General Paulus and his commanders, for the past 3 months, Russian forces had been slowly massing in the northern and southern regions behind the city. Under the command of Alexander Vasilevsky, these Russian forces would initiate a counteroffensive in order to encircle and trap the Sixth Army inside Stalingrad. This counteroffensive was known as Operation Uranus. As the Soviet counterattack charged forward, it became clear that the offensive was not necessarily aimed at Stalingrad itself, but the area outside Stalingrad, and at a specific vulnerability that the Germans did not expect. The 3rd and 4th Romanian armies that accompanied the 6th Army, for the most part, did not engage in fighting within Stalingrad. Instead, the Romanians occupied the area outside the city and guarded the flanks from any suspected counterattack. The Romanians were not nearly as skilled or as motivated as their German counterparts. They were often poorly mistreated by the Germans and lacked effective anti-tank equipment. Thus, they would be the perfect target for the Soviet assault. The Romanians didn't stand a chance against the Soviet onslaught. They were quickly defeated, and whoever remained surrendered and were taken prisoner. Thus, the Sixth Army's flanks were now compromised. The gamble worked, and Stalingrad was now completely surrounded. Seeing how dire the situation was, General Paulus was forced to withdraw most of his divisions from the front to guard his rear, abandoning his gains along the Volga and relieving an immense amount of pressure from what remained of the 62nd Army. It was also clear to all German commanders that a change of plans was needed. Being trapped within the city, the 6th Army couldn't hold on for much longer without resupply and reinforcements. Thus, a few courses of action were on the table. Course of Action 1. The 6th Army focuses its firepower on one portion of the envelopment and conducts a breakout on its own, abandoning Stalingrad but saving the army. Course of Action 2. An army in reserve assists the 6th Army in breaking out of the encirclement and escorts it across the Don River. Similar to the first course of action, but a much safer option. Hitler thought these two options were unacceptable. The seizure of Stalingrad was too crucial, and abandoning it was out of the question. Additionally, a breakout may have been more disastrous than it seemed. Confusion caused from the breakout could have made the situation worse for the 6th Army and any other army that joined it. Not to mention, destruction up north would have certainly meant destruction in the Caucasus. The Red Army, having freedom of maneuver, would have been able to attack south unopposed and surround Army Group A and possibly destroy them too. Therefore, Hitler ordered a third option. An army in reserve would attack the encirclement at Stalingrad and defeat the Soviets there. Once victorious, the reserve army would assist the 6th Army in capturing Stalingrad. Also, while attacking northeast, squadrons of Luftwaffe aircraft would airdrop supplies into Stalingrad, enabling the encircled army to continue fighting until reinforcements arrived. On 12 December 1942, German forces under the command of Field Marshal Erich von Manstein would lead the attack to relieve the 300,000 soldiers trapped within Stalingrad. The operation would be known as Operation Winter Storm. Simultaneously with the ground assault, German aircraft took to the skies to resupply the soldiers within the city, delivering such essentials as food, ammunition, medical supplies, and whatever warm clothing could be collected. Meanwhile, inside Stalingrad, German troops reorganized to hold on to whatever territory they could, while the Soviets, having more freedom to maneuver, pressed the attack. On the outskirts of Stalingrad, the Germans formed a defensive perimeter to block the Soviets from penetrating their rearward lines. Fighting here was akin to the First World War, in the trenches. Days passed, and by 22 December, Manstein's relief force had become bogged down while fighting the Soviet encirclement. With numerous casualties and little progress being made, Manstein realized that he lacked the resources and manpower to break through to Stalingrad. On top of this, the resupply effort was also not going as planned. The limited amount of German resupply aircraft available was being shot down daily, and by 22 December, only a few were left available to deliver supplies to the entrapped army. On 24 December, Operation Winter Storm was officially canceled, and Manstein's forces were forced to withdraw westward to a more defensible position. On top of this, Case Blue was canceled as well. Due to Stalingrad being a hopeless endeavor, Hitler used the forces within Stalingrad to be more of a delaying effort, holding the Soviet armies in place while Army Group South rebuilt a strong defensive position, essentially retasking the 6th Army for a suicide mission. For the next month and a half, the winter on the Eastern Front would quickly get worse. With the lack of effective winter clothing, German troops were succumbing to such ailments as pneumonia, frostbite, and hypothermia. While being cut off from supplies, they would also suffer from starvation and the lack of ammunition to continue fighting. The Soviets, on the other hand, were well supplied and had adequate winter clothing and food to survive the winter. They would squeeze the German army until it broke. In mid-January, the Russians were able to steamroll the German perimeter with ease. Having almost no working tanks due to the cold weather, the Germans couldn't hold the line anymore. They were forced to retreat back to the city. Those that were trapped inside were now fighting for their lives with the little ammunition they had over whatever little ground they held. On 26 January 1943, after months of back and forth control, the coveted Mamayev Kurgan officially fell to the Soviets for the last time. The capture of this point cut the German lines in two, creating pockets of German resistance in the northern and southern parts of the city. These pockets would be short-lived, however, and by 2 February, now Field Marshal Paulus decided that there was no point in continuing and officially surrendered the 6th Army. Having officially surrendered, the 91,000 remaining German soldiers were marched through the city and sent to prisons and labor camps throughout the Soviet Union. After over 6 months of fighting, the Battle of Stalingrad was over. From this point on, the Soviet army would no longer be a pushover. Feeling a surge of morale from their victory at Stalingrad, they were now highly motivated and effective enough to go head-to-head with the Germans on the battlefield. They smelled blood in the water, and they would attack the Germans head-on until they reached Berlin.